and welcome back to another episode of Office Hours Career Pathways for PhDs. My name is Jasmin Goodman, your host. I am excited to share yet another story of a PhD who has successfully transitioned away from academia. But what I want to make a note of is that we're not pro leaving academia, we're not pro tenure track. We are pro you finding a path that works best for you. So let me introduce our guest. He is Dr. Amir Sadeh. He's a Presidential Management Fellow at the U.S. Office of Personnel Management, and he earned his PhD in political science at the University of Notre Dame. So give me one moment to bring Dr. Sadeh to. Hello, how are you?
Hi, it's very nice to meet you. How about yourself? How are you doing?
I am great. Thank you so much for being here. So this is also a special interview because Dr. Sadeh was referred to us by Dr. Maryann Kwakwa, who is our executive producer, and she's also someone that she's helped to co-create this series. So you all went to school together at Notre Dame. So what type of student was she? Give me the tea on Dr.
The funny thing is she was like one of the people that I looked up to as someone she knew work-life balance perfectly. She knew how to work hard, but she also played hard. I can't tell stories out of school, but she was just somebody who just had it together, it seemed like, as like a first year. And she was doing really great research, and she was just somebody she's always been somebody approachable and easy to talk to. And I've always respected that about her. So when she got in touch with me about, the podcast, I said, absolutely, of course, I'm 100% down.
Awesome. Yeah. So essentially what I'm hearing is that I should have been either more like her when I was an undergrad, because I was all work in the doctoral program. I was just stressed out all the time. So it's good to have that balance. So now let's jump right in. So the top portion of our segment is called Journey into the Wild. And so I love to learn more about what prompted you to pursue your PhD in the first place.
Great. So for me, it was when you grow up as from a Middle Eastern background, immigrant family, you get 3 prescribed jobs you're allowed to have: doctor, lawyer, engineer. So growing up, I sort of had that higher education expectation. But I was never going to become a medical doctor. I was never the best at science. But it was always going to be like law degree or graduate school. And politics, I learned a lot about politics. My love of politics came from my dad. When we were growing up, we would watch the news together and we would talk about it. And that's really how we bonded. So political science was always something I was interested in, always. And when I was graduating undergrad, I took a gap year and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And my parents really wanted me to go to law school. I didn't. I didn't want to become a lawyer. I knew I didn't want to become a lawyer. And I knew if I was going to go to law school, I was going to be doing it to do something else. But politics had always been in the back of my mind. It had always been the thing that I came back to. And I think there's definitely a part of me, especially after 4 years at Rollins College, my alma. I met and had some amazing professors, and my advisor, Don Davison, was an amazing man. And he sort of helped guide me into that direction. And he was actually the reason why I applied to Notre Dame. That was his old alma mater. I just decided to go down that route because I was always interested in politics. I always wanted to learn more about politics. And I thought, wouldn't it be great to get paid to just talk and teach about politics the rest of your life, right? And I think that sort of cemented me going down that route, and ultimately applying for grad school and going to the University of Notre Dame for my PhD.
Now, at what point did your goal shift in terms of what you wanted to do with the doctorate? So you mentioned talking and teaching. So how did it evolve once you got into your program?
I think the first day orientation, those orientation days, we had I would describe it as like a come to Jesus, read the riot act moment, where it was like, hey, this is a top 30, this top 50, ranked 35 program. you need to expect that you're not going to be teaching at a, top 10 university. You need to be sure that you do get your, publications in. And, it was really like cementing all of the barriers that we were going to have to get a good tenure track job.
Okay.
And I think even from the beginning, I was like, okay, I should prepare a backup plan, just in case that, and I think as time went on, there's that idealism when you start grad school or when you think of becoming a professor. It's like, oh, I get to teach and I'll be, get to talk about politics all the time. I get to talk about what I love and I get to research interesting things. And as you go on, you learn, you grow up a little bit and you learn about the bureaucracy that comes with being in a grad program and the stresses that come with it and the anxiety that's sort of put upon you and just things like imposter syndrome and all that. I think as time went on, I sort of realized that, I knew that I loved political science. I loved teaching. But there were things that I didn't love about grad school and academia that I knew that it was sort of tilting between the two over time as to, okay, which one is this worth, is the good stuff worth dealing with the bad stuff and the hard stuff? And I sort of had like a breaking point in the middle of my program where I just had been through a lot of stress and mental health stuff. And I was like, I don't love being a professor more than I value the things that I've come to care about. When I was an undergrad, I was like a lot of students were, even high school, grades fixed. That was the most important thing. I want to be high achieving, high success. And when you go to grad school, you realize, oh, I'm not the smartest person in the room, right?
There are a lot of smart people. Yeah.
And you realize you have to if that's been your sense of identity, your sense of understanding of yourself, it like really shakes you to your core. And it makes you realize, oh, who am I? Right. And I think just ultimately all of those things sort of came together and made me realize, I don't want to have to sacrifice the rest of my life. Oh, you're a tenure track professor, but it's that, you have to live somewhere where you don't want to live, right? Maybe it'd be like in Oklahoma or Idaho or whatnot. And I'd be away from family. Like just all the things that I already sacrificed to get to that point. I think I saw the long road and I said, I'm not willing to sacrifice anymore. I need to figure out, I'm going to stay because I want my PhD. I want that. I knew I wanted that thing, but I'm like, I don't want the rest of it if that means I have to sacrifice all of the other things I care about, which are like family and hopefully finding somebody and getting married and having kids and knowing that if I wanted to become a tenure track professor, I'd have to give up a lot and I have to reconfigure my life around that goal.
Yeah, and that's really an important part of the conversation because people often think that when you get a PhD, it's just you go to school, you graduate, you get a job, and that's it. But there are so many sacrifices along the way that I almost think that everyone has like this moment of reckoning in their program when they have to decide, okay, what actually are my priorities? It's no longer just to, have the best grades and have, all of these things on paper. One thing that a friend of mine shared in my cohort as I was stressing one of the many, many times, and she said, Jasmin, your goal is to graduate whole. And when she said that, it was like, okay, that makes sense because I felt like I was breaking my back, just killing myself, trying to just get all of the work done. And so that helped me to reframe just my approach to school. So once you had your moment, what were your next steps once you realized that, okay, this is not the right fit for me? How did you go about exploring what was going to be a better option for you?
Well, I felt I got lucky that I had that realization around my third year, because I think a lot of people, they sometimes hold on to the maybe like I'm going to try and white knuckle it and keep white knuckling through it. And then they get to about, that fifth year or they're getting onto the job market and then things sort of hit them. I felt lucky that it was in the middle of my program where I'm like, okay, I am not going to go down the field of academia. I've made that decision and I'm going to start exploring what else I can do, And it was interesting because, I would tell people as a fourth year, as a fifth year, they would naturally ask, oh, so you're doing your dissertation. What do you hope to do next? I said, oh, well, probably going to look for something either nonprofit or government work. And they're like, oh, so you're not going to continue. And there was almost this like sad feeling. They were kind of mourning for you. And I'm like, no, you don't have to, you don't have to do that. I'm fine with it.
Okay.
But I think it's so built in. It's built into the system. Like, of course you're going to get your PhD and become a professor and do, so it almost sort of, it was kind of funny because I think it sort of emboldened my decision a little bit more. I'm like, no, I'm okay. Like, I appreciate it. I get that thinking, but no, I think I'm going to be fine. And really it just started searching. Okay, so if you're not going to get a job in academia, what are you going to do? Yeah. I started working with the career service at my college and just started searching. Okay, what do you do with the PhD in political science that isn't becoming a professor? And so I had a few general ideas sort of coming into it. Things like, okay, there's nonprofit work, there's think tank work, there's local government work, there's federal government work. And I just sort of slowly looked at all those avenues and said, okay, let me explore. For the longest time, I had this trajectory of graduate high school, graduate college, finish grad school and get my PhD. I think it was the first time in a really long time where I'm like, oh, I can explore. There isn't like a pre-prescribed route to go through. Okay. It's scary, but also kind of interesting and fun.
Now, with that, so you tapped into the resource at Notre Dame. What were some other resources that you used along the way? Or even if it's not just resources, what about strategies that you used to kind of map out this exploration phase of your career?
Well, definitely, the number one was utilizing the resources at the college, and I think using career services as much as possible is always to your benefit. I think also a lot of it was just going on LinkedIn, creating a LinkedIn profile, seeing what even jobs are out there, right? What are some of the basic requirements? Sometimes you are just trying to figure out, okay, how do I market my skills? I think grad school, a lot of times they don't do a good job explaining to you how your skills are very marketable outside of academia, right? So it was trying to search and figure out, okay, where do my skills fall into a work set outside of being a professor? A lot of that was just internet Googling, but LinkedIn for sure, career services for sure, and talking to professors and my advisors, people who I knew would be supportive of my decision. Because of course not everybody's going to be. Everybody's going to try and convince you, what are you doing with your life? Like, you're here, you're so close to getting your doctorate. Like, what do you and I was lucky that I had people in my corner who were like, oh, that's totally cool. Like, what are you thinking? Like, what do you want to do? And sometimes it was just having somebody just ask, well, what are you interested?
Right.
So those were, some of it was internet stuff, some of it was career services, and some of it was just having really great advisors and professors just to talk to and say, so what do you do after this thing?
Right. And thinking back on my experience, some of my most productive conversations that left me feeling just emotionally supported was just dropping by my professors during office hours and just saying, hey, I don't know what I'm doing today. What's going on? How do I do this? So having those relationships. But what I also heard was that it seems like you had a really strong sense of self and you were aware enough to know that, okay, you all have this perception of what I'm doing, but I know that I need to do something opposite and I'm okay with that. So if anything, if I want to emphasize to those who are watching is just knowing what you need and being okay with the fact that what you need or what you want can look very different from what somebody else is doing, and making peace with that. Because a lot of times we start to compare ourselves to, well, this person's going down the tenure track, this person has a book deal, this person is doing all these things, but is that what you want? Is that what you want right now? Asking yourself those questions so you're not on the other side of the country, far away from your family, working in a job that's not fulfilling to you.
I 100% agree. I mean, I think to even simplify it for myself, it was follow your bliss. That was the thing that I would tell myself all the time whenever I felt that I was like, am I doing the right thing? And I would just have to tap into myself and say, like, okay, what do you want? And what do you value? I think that's the thing is sometimes we get like, I think sometimes we equate the job or the success for what we value. And I think sometimes we forget that we have to sometimes tap in and be like, well, what do you value? Like, do you want this job because it's job security? Well, job security can be in a lot, you can find it in a lot of different places, right? Do you want this job because of, whatever reason, right? So I think it took me taking the time, and therapy is great for this, to just like figure out, what do I really want in this world? What do I care about? What do I value? And then seeing where I can sort of find that. I think follow your bliss has always been like my go-to to try and remind myself of that.
Yes. And one quick PSA for everyone watching, we are pro mental health support here. So if I know when I was in school, every Friday at 2:00, I would have my meeting with my therapist, Olivia. She would help me just work through all the things. So that's something that I've noticed, that it's important to have these conversations. One, while you're in the program, you need to have that support. But when you're thinking about taking what some deem to be a drastic turn in a different direction in your career, you absolutely want to have that support. So PSA for everybody watching, don't be
100%.
afraid to go talk to a therapist. It is okay.
100%. And especially at your university, because it is going to be covered, most probably covered under your health insurance. Do it. It literally saved my life. It was one of the best things I ever did for myself. And I know, especially like, I came from immigrant parents. They were not okay with that. They had all of the stigma in their brains as to like what that means. Like, oh, you're not crazy, Amir. Why are you? And I would just say 100%, like, even if you're not supported 100% by the people around you, if you feel like you need to talk to somebody and those services are available, 100%, it can really make the difference, especially in grad school. So I would just adding on to that PSA as well.
Yes. Now, tell me about your first job. So once you defend your dissertation, you graduate, what happens after that?
So I graduate. So I finished my 5 years, and then I graduate August 2020, and it is the middle of COVID. Yes. And luckily, the way that our program is set up is that they had a 5+1. So if you got done in 5 years, you get a 1-year postdoc. So my first job was essentially my postdoc, and I was working at Notre Dame as a professor, and I was teaching one class a semester. And I will say, like, I don't want to gloss over the postdoc, because I will say it has given me the sense of closure, or the sense of like fulfillment, that now that I'm doing something outside of academia now, I feel like, okay, like I did the thing. There's a part of me that always is like, okay, I can say that I was a professor at Notre Dame. I'll talk about like what I did before I got to my position now. But it was something that made me feel like, okay, great. And, part of me was also worried about not having health insurance during a once in a century pandemic. So I did that. And then after that year, I came back home.
Okay.
And for like the first 2 months, I didn't want to do anything at all. I was so tired. I felt so burnt out. Yeah. And my mom was a little bit like, listen, I don't want you to do anything that you feel you're not ready for, but I have a client. My mother cuts hair, so she talks to people. And she's like, I have somebody, there's an opening at Valencia College. They're looking for adjunct poli-sci professors. And, if you don't think you're ready for it, fine, but I think it'd be good so that you have something to do. And she was absolutely right. Like, I look back, and at first I didn't want to, like, do I really want to go and do work again? Like, I'm really just so tired and burnt out. But it ended up being a lifesaver, because I think it allowed me to sort of feel, useful. It made me go out and do things. Like, I had to, use my brain a bit. I wasn't just stuck at home the whole time. Yeah. So I sort of took a year. it ended up being a year, but I just worked as an adjunct at Valencia College. It was just community college in the area in Orlando, Florida. And I will say it radically changed my perspective when it came to teaching, in the sense that I realized my experience at Notre Dame as a postdoc was not the norm.
Okay.
It's different. Like when I was working at Valencia, I enjoyed my students. I love my students, but you would learn that the issues that my students at Notre Dame were facing were not the same issues my students at Valencia were facing. Right? I had students who say, "Oh, Professor Sadeh, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to make class. My supervisor won't let me off of work, so I have to work a shift." And that was the first time I ever had that as like this reason why a student couldn't come to class. At Notre Dame, of course, a lot of those students are on scholarship. They're not worrying about the finance. But at a community college, those are things that students are worried about, right? They are having to juggle professional life, like work life, on top of trying to go to school. And that was something that like changed my sort of thinking about, okay, teaching is not a uniform, it's not a monolith. Depending on where you're at, you have to make sure you're dealing with and helping your students with the unique issues that they deal with. So I did that for a year. We can kind of talk more if you have any other questions on that.
No. Well, one, mom for the win. So she referred you for the position. Gotta love mom. But then also too, you're the second person that's mentioned kind of having time to reset at a community college. So Dr. Brandell Mills Cox, she actually left a tenure track position. She was our first person that we interviewed. And she just took some time to figure out what she wanted to do. And she taught at a CC. And I think that's a great thing, because I taught at a community college when I was in my program, and I loved my students. I loved the environment. It was the right environment for me at that time. And I think when we think about, the pedigree of institutions and types of institutions, community colleges often don't get the best rap, but they have great students. They just have students that have different life circumstances that didn't allow them to go to different types of colleges. So I think that's a great point, to be able to have that experience, understand that teaching is very different, but then also have time for yourself to just kind of personally and professionally reset, because you need that time. And it didn't help. For reference, I graduated May 2020. So I defended April 24th, 2020. And I was just like, what is happening outside? The world is on fire. And I didn't want to do anything. So, for those who are watching, if you, were in a PhD program during the pandemic, if you had to defend at that time, it's okay to take a break, because you've done a very hard thing during a very hard time in just the world. And it's okay to have that time. So once you did the year at Valencia College, kind of tell me, what were your next steps after that?
So in the middle of that year, when I was still at Notre Dame, for instance, I had heard about the PMF program through the career services people. So during my postdoc, I had heard the Presidential Management Fellowship. I heard that this was an option. Oh, if you are looking into getting into government, this might be something that you would be interested in. And so I had heard about it, and I was like, okay, well, I will add that to the things that I apply for. Like, I will definitely, once I feel rejuvenated over that summer, I'm gonna, I'll start this job at Valencia, and while I'm doing that, I'm gonna apply for the PMF. And so I had applied in September 2021, right? So it was like right early on, right as I was starting at Valencia, I also was, okay, I need to start putting some little seeds out there and seeing what else is out there. So the way the PMF works is that at first you take an exam. It's like a test. Essentially, it's like a civil service exam. It's trying to understand your personality and how you sort of answer those sort of questions. And then you become if you pass that sort of section, you become a finalist. And I didn't think I was even going to become a finalist, because it's a pretty competitive sort of program. And my dad, like a week and a half before we were supposed to find out we were finalists, he was like, "You're going to get it. You'll be one." I'm like, "Dad, how do you know? Like, how do you know?"
Yes.
My parents, I love, they're very supportive, and they always just say the right thing. They're like, "Amir, like, I know you. and I know how passionate you are, and you are the type of person that should be in government. So love my dad, love my mom. And lo and behold, I became a finalist, which was great. It was exciting. But you become a finalist, but then you have 1 year where you have to actually land a job. So the benefit of the PMF program is it's designed for people who within 2 years of graduating from their law school or professional degree program, you can apply, right? You become a finalist, and if you become a finalist, you have 1 year to land a position in government. And the benefit of the PMF program is that you have a special job board where only other PMFs of that year are applying for those jobs, they're applying for those positions. So it sort of gives you a bit of an advantage, right, when you're out of cold applying to USA jobs, which it is really hard. I've heard and I've sort of found it's difficult to get into government cold without some sort of connection or some sort of, thing that helps. And the PMF program sort of says, okay, this person, they'd be fit for government work, but then you still have to get the job. So like, it was great that I was a finalist, but like, okay, now I actually still have to get a job. And it took I'd say about a year from the time that I first took that test in like September before I finally landed a position. And the statistic I heard was about 65, maybe 70% of the people who were finalists end up becoming fellows. So that's what I am now. So I not only passed the test, but I also have, I now actually have a job. And it was really stressful, those, I'd say 9 months from January till about September, when I was just like, at first you're like, oh, I have a year, I'll apply to a few things. Then March comes around and you still haven't heard anything, and you get a little bit antsy, and then it's May and I'm like, okay, now I'm just going to apply for everything and anything that I'm marginally qualified for and or marginally interested in. And funny enough, the way that I ended up where I am now, so I work at HUD right now, the Department of Housing and Urban Development. It was actually related to my dissertation. So my dissertation was Mobilization and Maria, Demographic Change in Florida and the Future of American Politics. And I specifically was studying the Puerto Rican migrant community in Central Florida before and after Hurricane Maria, and trying to understand the impacts of demographic change on state and national politics.
Got it.
One of the issues that became glaring as I did my qualitative work and doing a lot of interviews and field research was affordable housing. I didn't realize just how bad not only affordable housing in general is, but in my own backyard, Central Florida and Florida in general, just very difficult to find any sort of affordable housing. And I think that those sort of things that I learned, those sort of interviews I had, always stayed with me. It was one of the things that I made sure to highlight in my dissertation. And I kind of knew from the get, okay, well, HUD is going to be one of the top places I should apply for. And after tons of applications and numerous interviews, I finally found a position at the Office of Housing and the Federal Housing Administration. So that's where I'm at now. I've just started working September 26th, so it's all still fairly new, but it's been good.
Now, tell me, there's a lot there that I want to kind of tackle and get into. So what was your process for translating your academic CV into a resume for a government role? What were some changes that you had to make in terms of framing your experience?
Well, some of it is, I would highly recommend anybody who wants a job in government to use a government format resume. So there is specifically a way that the federal government wants you to lay out your sort of resume information. That was one of the big things that because I thought, I'll just change this into a resume. And then in the process, you're like, no, there's a specific sort of way they want it laid out. And a lot of it is like, there's a good chance that your resume is going to be going through a computer and they're checking for keywords, and then it'll go, so that was one of the big things. It's like, okay, I need to make sure this is just technically formatted the right way.
Okay.
But
now,
I think also
find that template. Sorry to cut you off there. How did you find that template? Was that made available through career services? Was that a Google search?
I believe it was a Google search. It was something that I found. And also I ended up having a friend of mine, it was actually my brother's friend, who was also in the process of the PMF. He sent me his copy that he had proofed by his advisor. So yeah, but it's something you can easily search online. I believe you can even find it on like the OPM website, the Office of Personnel Management website. But so that's definitely one thing. Definitely, if you're interested in getting to government work, make sure that your resume is sort of government approved. But also too, it was really sitting down and looking at the positions, like looking at the jobs that I want, and say, okay, what are they looking for, and what is my facsimile? Like, what is my thing? It's like, well, okay, are you able to analyze information? It's like, well, absolutely. I'm not only analyzing data on my day-to-day, but all of the lit review work. I mean, just doing literature review in and of itself has so many skills that you maybe don't for granted. Ability to read complex literature, being able to synthesize that information in a cohesive manner, being able to understand that information, right? And being able to talk about it, like public speaking. Can you take that information, put it into a presentation, and then talk about it in front of people? Those are some really great skills that I think a lot of academics, they take for granted as, well, that's just part of the job. And I'm like, no, like those are skills that you should highlight, because individually they're incredibly important, right? So it was really studying the job descriptions, breaking down, okay, well, what do these sort of jobs all look for? And at times that meant like changing, tinkering around with the resume here and there. But overall, I think after a while, you sort of start realizing, okay, they are looking for these sort of analysis skills, these sort of quantitative skills, these sort of public speaking or writing skills or whatnot. And you just sort of, you translate that. And I think that, but yeah, I think sometimes it just takes like, okay, what do I know? And then thinking, okay, well, what does this mean that I know?
Okay. Now, what was your preparation like for interviewing? Did you go in with a presentation? Did you have a portfolio? How did you prepare for a face-to-face conversation about roles?
Or Zoom to Zoom.
Zoom to Zoom, right.
So a lot of it was sitting down and first really analyzing the position. And a lot of times, if you read the job description, you sort of know, you can intuit the questions that they are going to ask, because they're going to be related to the job description or like the expectations, like those, they will. And some of the questions, there's, I feel like they're very common questions too, where it's like, oh, what do you care about in like a working environment? Or, I thought I would hear a lot more of like, what is your biggest weakness? And they don't really ask that. It's like a stereotype that you think. That's not necessarily what they're always asking. A lot of times they want to ask the things that they're looking for, right? So a lot of it was just sitting down, and lucky that I had my brother who has his own interviewing experiences, to just sit down, and I created about like 10 questions that I prepared for ahead of time. Not something that I could memorize by any means, but like sitting down methodically and thinking about, what is they want somebody to, for instance, I'm working in HUD, right? And my position is the Office of Housing. Okay, well, they're going to want to know, why are you interested in this position? Like, why are you interested in the mission of this organization? And it's good to just sit down and write 3 sentences, not to memorize, but just to okay, why do I care about this position? Why am I interested? And I would be able to talk about my experiences in my dissertation. So the reason why I'm interested in HUD is because I already know about, even in my own small sense, the issues that come with affordable housing, and how hard it is for people to find a place to live, and how important a place to live is to your emotional stability, financial security, all of those sort of things. And then it just became I just was getting able to talk about myself and what I love, right? So I think that a lot of that, for me, a lot of the preparation was just thinking about, what is on the sort of job descriptions, and then taking the time to prepare, to the point where, I just have my brother like ask me the questions, the night before, and I you talk about it until I get to a point where I was just talking conversationally. And that sort of really helps. And really, you want to try as best as you can to go into an interview is just being like, you know what? I already have an idea of what they're going to ask. And even if they ask me something I don't know, I know enough about why I want this position or why I care about this position that I can finagle something. I can say something because I know deep down I'm just having a conversation. I'm not preparing for a test. I'm not preparing, like, there is no right answer. The answer really is just how can I convey the stuff that I genuinely care about in a way that doesn't come off as rambling, as somebody who can be very talkative and just tend to ramble.
I love a good ramble myself, so that is okay. Now, one thing that's important about what you've just said, and it's really been a theme in interviews that we've heard so far, that it's important to be conversational about your work, and you don't want to come off as too cold or too technical, but just talk like how we're having a conversation right now. That's the best way to approach your work so that people can understand, because what you don't want to do is have like that barrier between, you're so academic that you're not able to translate that work into everyday application. So I love that you brought that up. For our viewers, you will hear an interview with Dr. Amber Hamilton. She also talks about how when she's in her role, she's able to, just make it conversational. So you're not, the too much of a nerd or too much
Wonky.
of an academic wonky in the room. Right. Now you go through the process, you land the job. What was the first day like? Were there jitters? Were we excited? How did we feel?
It was total nervousness. It was again, like, I think imposter syndrome never leaves you, right? Especially when it's something new and you're like, did they make a mistake in hiring me? Like, what is and it's a different world too. I started off with orientation. The orientation days were cool and they were fine. And I finally got into the office and I'm scared as all hell because I've had to go through trying to get all my documents in order and getting everything in. And I'm in like this government building and I'm like, oh my God, like this is real. Like I'm not, yeah, it's like I'm not just like in grad school anymore. Like I'm doing the thing, So there was a lot of those jitters and like, I don't want to screw up. Because I think that if you're a lifelong student, if you will, I know how to ace a test, or I know how to study for a test. But being in government or having a typical 9 to 5 were very foreign things to me. Like it was never sort of the stuff that I had. So in the beginning, it was sort of like a fish out of water. Like, okay, don't say the wrong thing. Don't do the wrong thing. How can I learn? And I will say one of the things that I've had to do personally throughout this time is intentionally remind myself to give myself grace. Because I think we are so hard on ourselves as academics because of the nature of academia. And sometimes it's also just a personality thing. And I think that if you don't 100% know something, or you don't feel you have a handle on it, you feel like you're on the back foot, and makes you really scared and makes you really nervous and really anxious. So I think, even reminding myself, even now that I'm a month in, dude, you're only just a month in. Like there's still tons of stuff you need to learn. And it's okay. It's okay to ask questions and it's okay to not know. Because that's the whole point, is to learn and to teach and stuff. So the beginning was stressful and anxious and scary. Now it's not as stressful, anxious, and scary. But it's still a learning process.
Now, what is that culture shift like from academia, super flexible, you're basically in charge of your own day, to now working in a corporate or government role? What does that look like? What does it feel like?
For instance, when I was in academia, I would be able to freely talk about my work with my friends and my family. They wouldn't know what I'm talking about, but I could talk about, just like talk about whatever. Now I don't necessarily have that luxury where I can just willy-nilly talk about the stuff that I'm doing, because a lot of that stuff is secret and privileged and stuff and confidential. So also another one of the differences, and I actually talked about this with my supervisor at the time, or my new supervisor. And I said, it's interesting when I would go out with my colleagues on a Friday night, and we would inevitably talk about work because academics are horrible about talking about anything else but the work they do. There was camaraderie in the struggle, but we were all doing different things. We were all doing vastly different research assignments. Some people are international politics or political theory or comparative politics, and there's us American politics folks. But when I am in government and when I'm talking to the people in my office, or the people, my colleagues, my work colleagues, like, we might be doing vastly different assignments, but we're all working towards the same goal. And there's this like feeling of like you're part of something bigger than yourself, and there's a sort of bond. It just, I don't know, it feels different. Like I felt like in grad school we were like comrades in ours, and we're all struggling together, but in our own little struggles. And I think in here it's like, yeah, we have a lot of work to do. There's an uphill climb. There's a lot of things we're like dealing with, but we're all dealing with them together, and we all have this like singular goal of providing affordable housing and trying to help people get into a home and live the American dream. And I think that it's very different. Like there's just like that ethos difference that I think is really cool and something that I've noticed. And then there's also just like the technical stuff. Like on a day that I wasn't teaching, I'd sleep until noon because I was being lazy. And I'm like, you know what? That's that professor life, right? Now, nope, 9 to 5, getting up early, and it took a little bit, but now my body is, by the time it's 11:30, I'm already getting sleepy. And if you told that to Amir 2 years ago, he wouldn't believe you, because he would be up till 3 or 4 in the morning every other night or whatnot, because time meant nothing, right? We've been in COVID. Time means nothing. So that, just even that stuff where it's like getting ready for work and commuting, I was able to walk to work when I was at Notre Dame. I didn't have a car. I still don't have a car, but now I use the metro, and I have to, use public transportation. So I have to configure that into my, commute. So there's a lot of different things. But yeah, I would definitely say the big one was time management. That was the big difference. That was the big change, where it was like, okay, I have to learn to use the limited time I have at night, Monday through Friday, And I will also add, what you lose in having all that free time during Monday through Friday, what you gain is not having to think about work on Saturday and Sunday, which is completely different. Because in academia, you can make your schedule, but there's always another paper you can write. There's always more research you can do. There's always papers to, it never truly ends. And I think that was one of the biggest problems for me. And also one of the big reasons I left academia was I never felt I had a true break from it.
Yeah.
But in a 9 to 5, the great thing is after 5 on the weekend, I close my work laptop and I don't look at it until Monday morning, maybe Sunday night, just in case I don't miss an email. And I think that in and of itself has been completely worth the change out of academia and into government work.
Right. Now, understanding that you can't share specifics about your role in the work that you're doing, kind of tell me on a day-to-day basis, when you open your computer Monday morning at 9 a.m., what does that day look like?
So Monday morning, I'll have an all-hands sort of meeting with the people in my office. We were just, talking about the issues, like what's on everybody's plate, what's on everybody's schedule. Because I'm a PMF, I'm learning a lot about the office. So I'm trying to just sit in on meetings for people in other departments and trying to learn a little bit about, all of the different offices in HUD and the Office of Housing, single family, multifamily, manufactured housing. I'm very much a newbie at this. So right now is the I'm a sponge. Please let me sit in meetings and let me take my notes. And they're very much if you have any questions, just let us know. At the end of a meeting, I'll have somebody from the office who was in the meeting as well be hey, what did you understand? Tell me what you didn't understand, and we can talk about it, right?
That's
Just
awesome.
it's the learning stage right now.
Yeah.
So it's sitting in a lot of meetings that, quite frankly, I don't understand half of what's being talked about. But slowly, as I sit in more meetings, I learn a little bit more about the language and the lingo, and I'm learning all the acronyms and whatnot. When I'm not doing that, I'm, working on, any assortment of odds and ends of assignments, right? Things that need to be written or edited or whatnot, things that need to be fixed, and using all of those sort of writing analytical skills, just being a good writer, professional writer that you are when you are an academic, because you have to grade papers and you're so used to grading grammar, doing that sort of thing. And a lot of it, the great thing about what the people that I work with is that a lot of it has been choose your own adventure. It's the first few months, you are just trying to learn what's going on. But, if you want to learn more about single family, then here, how about you check out this initiative? Or if you're interested in learning about multifamily housing, how about we get you connected with these people? And now I'm just slowly getting inched assignments to me hey, can you look at this? Or hey, sit in this meeting and take notes. I want a briefing, So as time goes on, the ultimate goal of the program is to have you, within 2 years, there is a professional development aspect to it, so PMF specifically. So, when I'm not doing my job, I'm also applying for or going to professional development events, and I have to get a certain amount of hours in each year. And really, the idea behind the PMF isn't just so that, you have a job in government for 2 years. So you have 2-year fellowship, but it's also to be able to, hopefully you become a project manager and a project leader and somebody who, if you want to, can grow within the organization, right? So it's a mix of just doing job stuff, but it's also taking the time and doing a lot of professional development work and learning just how to be, how does government work and how you can be a good leader to hopefully progress throughout the ranks and whatnot, if you do decide to continue with government work.
Now, in your current role, or even just since graduating, because your dissertation did deal with, or there was an element about housing, have you found yourself wanting to continue doing academic research on that, or have you found ways to publish? Tell me more about what that's been like for you.
So I've found some ways to sort of keep that going. I have been working on a manuscript to send out, or for books, for academic journals and whatnot. I always still tell my advisor, it's if there's any free projects you have right now, I still have some free time. I don't know what my life is going to be like in 6 months, but I'm still open to working on research and stuff. And there's also that opportunity down the line where once I become more comfortable with the area, where I'd love to still teach a night class at one of the universities in the area, right? Just to still have that sort of thing. And I think having the experiences of my postdoc at Notre Dame, and then still teaching even that one, well, not one, I actually taught a few classes, but having that Valencia adjunct experience as well, I think it was really nice because I don't feel rusty. I still feel like that teaching muscle is there. So there are definitely opportunities where I feel like I still can exercise that muscle and still be involved and still have that sort of academic fulfillment. But I think also there is a part of me where, if in 2 years from now I am fully in the world of like government work and I really like my job and I just don't have any time for academia anymore and that's sort of it and that ship has sailed, I'm okay with that because I feel like I did all the things that I personally, I accomplished the things that I wanted to, especially during the circumstances of COVID, having to try and finish that. I feel at peace. There's still stuff I want to do. I mean, there's still, I still love teaching, but I think I'm finally embracing the journey and not the destination. I think it took a long time, especially in academia, where you are focused on the destination for a while. I think right now I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to focus on the here and now and just see whatever happens, happens.
So you've dropped gems. So first is find your bliss.
Absolutely find your bliss. Absolutely.
The second one is also choose your adventure. And then the third is just, doing what works best for you. So now let's talk about our final segment is titled Mentorship Moments.
Okay.
So let's say I like to do this. You get a frantic email from someone. Maybe they're a PhD candidate. They're trying to figure life out. Dr. Sadeh, how do I do this? What do I do next? What advice would you share with someone who's reaching out for help?
Are they so where in the like course of their sort of thing are they? Yeah.
So let's just say they're trying to think through their career options. What's some advice that you would give them for landing a job? Just anything that you share that would be top of mind for you.
I would say, as cheesy as it is, it's like not like a part of it is like it's one thing to say like follow your bliss, but first you got to know what that is. Like I would first tell them like what do you want to do, and not just like don't tell me like what job you want, but like what do you want to do, like what sort of work fulfills you, like what things are you interested in, that's like the first thing, because I think like I mentioned beforehand, we put a lot of we subscribe our values or what we want into a job or a position, and it doesn't, it's supposed to fulfill that. But I think that first tapping in and being like, okay, what is the thing that I need? What do I care about? Do I care about being somewhere close to my family? Do I care about, the job security, how much I'm getting paid? Like, what are the things that I value? So that's the first thing. And when you kind of start there, you realize, okay, there are jobs, there's a variety of jobs that can help fulfill that, right? So I think that's the first thing. And then once they've sort of figured out what they want to do, whether it's in academia or, now my experiences outside of it, I would tell them, search, Google, go LinkedIn, like if you have some sort of idea of what you want to do, maybe not what you want to do as in, oh, I know I want to do this job. But it's like, okay, I want to work in this field, or I want to help people, or, I want to do more research. Once you have that, then you can just start searching for things that allow you to do that. Right. And, I think taking the time to do that is incredibly valuable. And then finally, I would say to them, the job market, whatever you do, is hard. Like the academic job market is hard, but trust me, getting a government job, getting any sort of job is hard. And just remember that it's a marathon, not a sprint. Like you have to just be firm in knowing what you want to do, and knowing, okay, these are the things I'm okay to settle for, and these are the things that I have to have, right? And no matter how sort of bleak it can be, because there were certain potential opportunities that I could have had before I got this position that I were offered, and it was getting into the process where I was like, I should accept something. But I talked with my family, and they're like, do you really want this? And I'm like, I really don't want to keep living at home. Like I turned 30 September 22nd this year, right? And one of my own mental things is like, I don't still want to be at home when I'm 30. It was just a mental thing that I had. But my parents and my family, and I'm very lucky that I have people like them in my life. They were able to kind of touch me back in and be like, listen, but you really don't want this. Like, you want to get out of the house and you want to live on your own again, but like, is this worth this position? And it wasn't. And I said no. And it was really hard to say no to some of those jobs.
Yeah.
But I finally got the thing that I'm like, I held out, and I'm really happy that I waited and reminding myself, oh, these are the things that I care about. I live in Washington, D.C. I have cousins in Maryland. I have family in Virginia. I'm surrounded by my support system. When I was in South Bend, Indiana, I was completely alone. I was by myself in the cold Midwest, never been in before in my life. And those years were hard. It added to my mental health, and it was deleterious and made me depressed, and added to that. Here, when I moved here, I had a baked in family and support system from the get-go. So I would tell them that. I would tell them, just know what you want, do the research necessary, and be willing to put in the time and effort. And it'd be okay if it takes a while. It's going to take a while. But keeping hold to that guidepost will help you land somewhere that you really want to be. And yeah.
That was awesome. And one thing I wanted to follow up on, I think it's important for a lot of PhDs who are looking to make that transition. Don't get so caught up on, the shiny bells and whistles and, oh, it's this salary, it's this signing bonus, because yeah, that's great. But if you might be making money, but are you going to be happy? Are you going to have peace? Are you going to feel fulfilled? And money can't provide that, or the benefits or the notoriety that may come with working with a particular company. You want to make sure that you know what's important to you, so that you make decisions from a place with your well-being at the forefront, instead of just going and chasing after what everything is going to get you the most money or the most benefits or whatever else you're looking for outside of what you know that you need to thrive. And the goal is not just to survive, but to thrive. Yes.
And just to add, I would also say, I think you made this point earlier, and I think it's incredibly important to note. It's so hard not to compare yourself to your colleagues. It's so hard not to compare yourself to so-and-so who has 3 or 4 journal publications and is about to get their book published. It's really hard to not compare yourself to somebody who just got a tenure track job at a really good university. And I would say to people that, it's hard to not compare yourself, because you're all in the same place, right? But I would say that it's like, you never know how that person is, what they're dealing with, what their situation is, and what their situation might work for them, and that might be great. But I think also it is coming back and tapping into yourself and being like, okay, it's not about the success maybe that's going on right now. I think it's more so about how can you make sure that you are ultimately happy in that success, and also knowing how do you define success. Like for me, if you're going through the traditional metrics of what a successful postgraduate student would be, I'm technically not successful. I didn't get a tenure track job. I'm not a professor. I don't hit those barometers of success, but
for your definition of success.
Exactly. But my definition of success, I'm ecstatic. Yeah. I get to live in Washington, D.C. I get to work in the government. I get to help people, ultimately doing things that I know are going to help people stay in their homes or find a place to live. Yeah. I am happy with the amount I make, and I feel comfortable. I live comfortably. I get to live on my own. I have a single apartment. Like the things that matter to me, especially like where I was a year ago, I feel successful. I feel happy. And I think that redefining what success isn't what everybody else thinks success is. It doesn't have to be that. Success really can be what you define it. And that's why I always say, like, you got to know your bliss. You got to follow your bliss, because that's going to be the thing. That'll be the guiding light that really allows you to determine what success really is.
That is the perfect ending note. Thank you so much for your time and your wisdom. Maryann, this was amazing. So everyone, thank you so much for watching. Make sure that you subscribe to our channel. If you want to share your story, just send us a quick email. We'll be happy to add you to our lineup. All right, y'all, have a great rest of your day. Bye.